First of all, I
Awesome.
want to thank Nicholas for coming in and doing this evening. This is a really important aspect, as we start lining things up for not only rotations, but also for, residency preparations.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate him taking the time for this session this evening. And with that said, I will turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Nicholas Latore. I'm coming from South New Jersey at Rowan Virtuous School of Osteopathic Medicine and presenting today on CV preparation and letters of recommendation, more so from the perspective of preclinical and keeping in mind internal medicine as well. And I think with this, it kind of fell right in line with a lot of the workshops I've been doing recently, more honing into specific specialty preparation from an earlier standpoint. And I think being proactive, starting early, and considering even what you'd want to do during rotation years ahead of time is going to be really helpful. So that's the perspective I'm really trying to take here. But I do like to focus on the big picture and understanding kind of formatting when it comes to CV, and then even general recommendations as well for the letters of recommendation. In the case students might be exploring like other specialties as well, but just to kind of also get that groundwork. And then, so starting us off, looking at breaking down just really briefly the parts of the residency application. By the way, it does say my internet is a little flaky right now, so any problems, just let me know. But I'm gonna kind of break down the general part so we understand where the CV, letters of recommendation, fit in, and then look at the general CV format that we talk with our students about. A lot of the time mirroring really what the residency application is going to be asking for. So we kind of think of it as preparing a strong CV is ultimately preparing what are you going to put on your residency application, and then building a strong CV for internal medicine specifically. So he's giving some thought to what experiences we might see typically for an applicant, strong applicant for internal medicine, and letters of recommendation, what to consider going into your clinical years. So as far as parts of the residency application, gotta move this out of the way. Again, big picture, just to kind of take that step back, CV, letters of recommendation fitting very much in here as a part of all these pieces that go into your residency application. And so with this CV, it really becomes your main application. And I might repeat at different parts that it isn't uploaded to your application in a sense. It is copy and pasted over or transcribed over to that format of the residency application, which for internal medicine being ERAS, and for most specialties, ERAS, Electronic Residency Application Service, which is run by the AAMC, and then letters of recommendation fitting in I think really as this main kind of focus for, of course, your clinical skill basis, strengths, and any other kind of qualities, characteristics that we want to mention from the perspective of people who might know you best on these rotations, maybe sometimes otherwise outside of rotations, but mostly from clinical rotations, focusing on those clinical skill strengths. So you can see other areas definitely a part of the application, but just wanted to highlight, these are one of two main areas definitely that are really, really important. The CV, basics of the CV would include this makeup of core areas that we would recommend. You might see some differences that might vary for students' experiences coming in, such as like maybe teaching experience as well, or other honed in kind of areas. But these would generally capture pretty much everything we would want to focus on. And then again, transcribing over to what the residency application is going to focus on: your education, certifications, honors, and awards, experiences broken down to research, work, leadership, and volunteering and service. Um, Kind of thinking about your extracurriculars. We actually modified it this year to join those two together, extracurriculars and service. We kind of think of it broken down where work is everything you're paid for, research obviously being related to research, and our extracurriculars kind of being everything else. Publications and presentations being results of research. I'll focus on the differences really there between what we say with research and that section. And then any additional highlights with interests, skills, hobbies being really helpful to provide more of a kind of personality and individualistic nature of your application beyond what would be typically academic or extracurricular. Um, with the CV, you could be using it for lots of different reasons. And we actually require at our institution a review of the CV, knowing how important it is to have a solid professional CV. With that, we would say that it's not only for the residency application, but other reasons as well that we want you to have a solid CV to use and send out. So again, for the residency application, it's transcribed over, but letters of recommendation, you might, this goes hand with our other topic today, you might want to have a solid CV to send in your request out to letter writers. Elective applications later, when maybe you might see electives in third year, but definitely going into fourth year, having a solid CV as a part of those applications is good. Also applying for scholarships, awards, research opportunities, maybe even assisting your career MSP advisor. We require it for review and then upload it to our system for MSPE review. So definitely helpful for us as individual advisors and guiding students to know the big picture with their applications looking like. We talk about the differences between CV and resume being very important, that we're understanding where the terminology is at, and essentially why these exist as two different things. So the curriculum vitae, the CV, could generally considered longer, more detailed, more in-depth overview of your accomplishments across all different realms, but especially used for these kind of industries with academia and medicine, because it's giving a broader, bigger picture. All relevant information would be included. We recommend sticking to about 2 to 5 pages. Anything longer than that really is a little too long. So it shouldn't be anything and everything necessarily. It still should be relevant, still as concise, where you're trying to, give your overview of experiences, but we don't need 10 plus pages of that to do that well. Continuously updated resumes, much more concise, usually 1 page or maybe 1 page per kind of college degree. Once you're advancing in your education, you increase it. Much more about design and appeal factor. This is a visual breakdown of the differences, just catching your eye. You see maybe the CV looking a little bit, we could say basic, but traditional in the sense of font, of lack of color, and things that are generally kind of more design or visual driven. It is just right to the point. We get what we get in terms of our experiences and the different sections broken down versus that resume. So I think with that, if you're leaning more towards that right side, that resume, we definitely want to be converting it over to a more standard CV type of format. We have a template at our school, but I mean, it's not hard to find some really solid CV templates, even for these specific purposes of being a medical student. Experiences before medical school, we would say, are few that we'd want to really consider as stand out to include on the CV. And it's not as much this, I think the stigma might exist just considering experiences before medical school. Why would programs want to focus on that? They want to focus on where you're at during medical school. But I think it has to do more with the length of time. So by the time going into fourth year and applying for residency, these things become less and less recent and therefore relevant as a reflection of your current skills and strengths and abilities. So I like to explain it that way because students will try to include all these great things, and some of them would be strong. And I would actually have this criteria to really discern that. So are these experiences related to health sciences, medicine? Was it a position you held as a scribe or EMT? Experiences accounts for a significant amount of time. I held a leadership role for 1 year or this research position for 2 years, to where it was really significant in that way. Or experience involved a leadership or important role. So where you held a lot of responsibility. Definitely, I think these could lean more towards significant and worthwhile to include in medical school. CV or CV applying for residency, sorry. And if it doesn't meet these things, you're really still not sure, just ask yourself, do I see myself talking about this experience significantly in an interview? And then if yes, include it. So if a student at the end of the day is like, I find this really significant, I really think this is important to consider, and it's before medical school, include it because before for you, that's individually important. Um, Things to remove from the CV, for instance, will be things like Dean's List or other kind of awards and activities that are less significant when it comes to applying for residency. Going back farther, especially things from high school, we would definitely say are getting farther and farther away. So again, just even considering time generally within the last 5 years is the main focus for a CV, even outside of these purposes. So kind of aligning with that. Shadowing preceptor experiences are not as much relevant when it comes to the time you're applying for residency. These experiences are definitely overshadowed by your clinical rotations. You're having these rotations that are much stronger experiences than shadowing, where you're hands-on. So those reduce and then get left off for these purposes or applying for residency. Short-term irrelevant work experiences and scholarships received during undergrad. Again, just not as significant examples there. When a section is empty, essentially, we wouldn't include it. We would and should have anything, something to put for like education, certifications, interest, skills, hobbies. There should be something you can throw in there. Even certifications would be, we include the passing of exams. So, or certain certifications that you would earn maybe a part of your curriculum. So BLS. But yeah, generally it's not meaning it's like super specific, unique things. The education, interest, skills, obviously you should have some things to put there. But other sections, say research, I don't have research experience. Don't include that title and have it empty. Definitely leave that off. Essentially, you're focusing eventually on really what's there and leaning into that, and focusing on those as your strengths. Um, Well-rounded doesn't necessarily mean you have to have everything, but can have maybe more of a focus, say, on like service and leadership than research or teaching kind of opportunities. Research versus publications, presentations, like I said, these are separate pieces. And to understand, they would be their own kind of sections for certain purposes when it comes to the CV, and then the application later for residency. The research section would be similar in formatting to your work section, your volunteer section, that you're listing out your role, you're listing out the organization, which maybe in that case is an institution or entity you're doing research with. You're also adding basic information like the advisor you're working with, but it's similar in that format of having your position, having the organization, and then underneath the responsibilities that you were holding in a part of that, taking part in that research. So how much kind of work were you doing? Maybe more kind of administrative, or actually like hands-on lab work. And with that, it is giving that chance to go into those skills that you're developing. Um, these things may include the result of having like a publication coming from it or presentation, but you can still have this experience listed in the section. And I would recommend that, again, really focusing on the skills that you were developing. Because when we hop over to the publications, presentations, and even abstracts section of the CV, we're thinking more about, of course, those formal citations that we can put in the AMA style that is not including a description of your skills and experience. So there's definitely benefit in including your experiences on both ends, even if, say, again, a research experience results in a publication. We would recommend for students that they are only including things that are accepted or actually completed as a or published, for instance, or presented as a publication or presentation or abstract, not things that are pending review. Now, there's some maybe kind of arguments for that sometimes as far as how close some things might be, or if it's along the way of a process. and including on the CV is not as much of, I think, a concern when it comes to that as it might be for the residency application. I think those program directors really looking to see what's actually accepted or already published, presented as that accomplishment. It's not like you haven't accomplished something by submitting something, but maybe we include that under the research experience as pending. And again, another benefit of having that experience listed there. Um, so then with some common errors seen, I think including some fluff, things that are just filler, just buffing up the resume with information that's less relevant, details that we don't really need to know. So still, as much as this might be a long running kind of a piece of your application, it is definitely still important to focus on what's significant. Repeated verbs. So under your experiences, you would typically see either bullets or full sentences that give those descriptions, again, like the research describing your activities as a part of that research experience or work or volunteer or leadership roles. With those, you should start each line with a verb, the same kind of formatting on a typical resume. Definitely want to vary those verbs that you're using and make those exciting. Don't just say worked, blah, 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 or organized, blah, blah, blah. You would want to include a little bit more engaging of verbs, hopefully that reflect those skills that you were doing. Think about what like kind of active verbs you can use and then vary those. My rule of thumb is never repeat a verb if possible so that you can highlight those various skills that you're developing. And inconsistent font formatting, that's just a real big pet peeve of mine, but it just looks sloppy at the end of the day. So fonts being the same, sizes being the same for things. If you're punctuating somewhere, you're punctuating there for that spot consistently throughout. Trying to be design heavy, again, back to the resume, it's different. And then forgetting page numbers. And that's actually something we have a person that just reviews CVs and personal statements at our institution. And he is always catching those, I think, well before me, in that you have the CV that might be 3, 4, 5 pages, have those page numbers. So when someone is printing that out or has it hands on, that they're not losing track of, that order kind of thing when going through your CV. Very simple, but very important. All right, now, so considering a strong CV for internal medicine, we're going a little bit more in depth considering what you might be applying for here. And I was saying that I think this is in line with a lot of workshops I've been doing recently where I get these questions all the time. And so I've been taking the time to do deeper dives on what our students are doing that are especially having strong matches into strong residency programs for the different specialties. So I start with looking at what are the trends and kind of key areas to internal medicine right now or consistently and ongoing to where you want to develop your CV. So you're starting intentionally with, well, what will the residency program find significant or stand out as relevant to the specialty and where I want to drive my CV to go. So these are just some areas that might be stand out and important to different residency programs. Of course, they're going to vary in terms of their needs and size and resources, research, involvement, and things. So that is not going to be the same for every single program, but you're developing this broader collection of experiences, hopefully that can apply to different IM programs. So things like focus on DEI or interdisciplinary collaboration and team-based care is like, really thinking about what's going on, what's the pulse of this specialty, and then building things that would appeal in that direction. So we can think about research on clinical topics that, of course, are relevant to internal medicine. It's kind of pretty given, but not, I would say it's not always the case that we're going to see by any means students only doing research for that given specialty, but maybe considering when we can have those opportunities, that would be great. But if anything, I would say too, is just like those research skills being really of interest to like academic programs that might be transferable, not always having to focus on those subjects relevant, but again, that could help you have that extra edge. Engaging in relevant quality improvement projects. So a lot of times we think about research projects, but what about quality improvement projects, patient safety projects that could be relevant to the specialty to engage in? Taking on education related positions, a lot of the time it is of interest or appealing when having academic related roles like tutoring, leading workshops for different clubs, or for instance, there might be like skills-based workshops that our students will do for the internal medicine club or cardiology club that will show that leadership in their, developing those skills. Being a teaching assistant or creating educational materials, we have individuals in our office, which is the Center for Student Success at our institution, combines career and academics together, that will have students come in and help us with workshops, help us with creating materials. And that's only helping them in building a stronger experience with the institution, especially for those that are interested in academic medicine. And so we have an elective as well at our institution. So if your institution doesn't have that, maybe that might exist at another institution you could do a rotation at, and that could be of interest to you. And then residency programs, learning about healthcare delivery models, health economics or policy initiatives, as well as certain technological tools, EMRs, data analysis, informatics tools, things that are very much of use in the field and relevant. So you're really could be considering this as that preclinical student going into clerkship years, that I want to really lean into, these type of experiences on my rotation. But this could be other ways that you're getting maybe like certifications in certain areas, or doing additional, research or studying up in different ways. And then, so I did this look at some of the students at our institution that recently matched at really strong academic programs, or just higher programs with like higher rankings. And so I try to pull, especially from those most competitive students for internal medicine, looking at common themes as well as exact examples that could be pulled. So I know it's smaller text, but there's a lot here that I was trying to include. Those that are highlighted behind words that are highlighted behind a box would be those themes. So leadership and initiative experiences, commitment to service and community outreach, and then underneath bullets that would highlight specific experiences. And every student that I combined together, I found at least some leadership role, if it was with student government or other type of roles, that they were holding that may be internal at the institution, but also external. And I always advise and try to push students not just to think about what's internal at the school, what external opportunities might exist, such as with this great organization and association, or others that definitely might have these opportunities for leadership for students. Commitment to service and community outreach, very common among family medicine peds as well, any ones that relate to primary care. Always going to be interesting to residency programs, having that deeper dive and knowing your community. Maybe that might be relevant to the specific programs you're interested in. If you're interested in inner city programs, having that experience of not just one specific city, but that could be beneficial to different cities that might have similar kind of needs, working with underserved and marginalized populations. Advocacy and health equity focus. So active engagement in projects related to health disparities. Definitely saw a lot of individuals have DEI kind of efforts and experience, that they're advocating for different kind of causes, passionate that to them kind of relates back to that community kind of service piece, and working with individuals that might be underserved and supporting. Teaching and mentorship, definitely a strong trend, again back to that interest and work in academic medicine related type of experiences, or just general kind of more academic roles. And then resilience and personal growth, overcoming personal hardships. And this is not necessarily, I guess, something you would put on a CV, to be honest, but might relate in some way to kind of why you might be engaging in something. So I, had this personal experience. That's why I want to serve a certain specific population, for instance, or do research on these different areas, because I had that personal tie. So if it could extend beyond just, I want to help serve these people, but I have more of this personal passion for that because I can empathize, that could come across also on the personal statement or other areas. So think about where your CV can then connect to different areas of your application. I think those consistency and those parallels really help to solidify that individuality, that personal kind of identity that we want to really lean into, and you're going to be more memorable that way when there's that consistency across the application. Research experience, so research projects, again, in relative areas probably, but maybe some others as well. So the last piece would be letters of recommendation. And then so with letters, again, you really are looking at collecting these on clinical rotations, not as much ahead of time, but I think this is really good when thinking ahead on, how would I want to uh, uh, consider what letters I want to get and the best way to maybe go about that. So the basics, we generally will recommend students will get 3 to 4 letters of recommendation. Well, actually, so you're only allowed to upload up to 4 on the ERAS system and the application, or sorry, I said that wrong. You can send up to 4 to residency programs. You can upload as many as you like. That should be clarified. And I would say to collect as many as you can, definitely to be over prepared when going through these rotations. You think there might be an opportunity, why not ask? The only way that these individuals will know if you use the letters of rec are if they're tied to those residency programs you're applying to. But 3 to 4 is that goal number that you would send to residency programs. 3 really being that minimum. Out of those, we'd say 2 should be related to the specialties. So, for instance, internal medicine, you could have 2 letters from an internal medicine rotation, like your core internal medicine rotation, or what we call a sub internship or elective in 4th year. Maybe a cardiology rotation or GERE rotation. Well, those would count as internal medicine letters. About 1 page in length each, or how these are looking on the end of the writer, focusing on your standout skills and strengths and being really, really helpful for residency programs to get that inside look of what is it like to rotate with you, to have you, on site. I'm going to highlight some unique letter types, especially for internal medicine to consider, but this probably be later, but just getting ahead. So then with the approach being to specialty specific letters, you really want to seek out those strong opportunities. That's what they're mostly looking at, are those related letters. And so it's hard to imagine starting off into rotations. What is a strong opportunity? What is my best opportunity to ask for a letter? It tends to be where you can have a lot of experience, a lot of responsibility given to you, trusted upon you, to where then you get to, uh, shine. And for those writers, seeing that, it would be expected that they're getting to see you. Maybe they're giving feedback to you to understand that you're doing well. So you're making this good connection with someone essentially where they're recognizing you, they're giving you that feedback. Maybe they're helping you develop as well, but that's a part of that constructive feedback too, to where then they could really understand your skill development and highlight those strengths. In asking for a letter, usually these individuals would maybe have written a letter at one point for an individual. If not, you can, I'd certainly provide them some understanding of how this can be beneficial for you. But with that, they're pretty much acknowledging and accepting when saying they'll write you a letter, that it's going to be focused on those positive, focused on those strengths. Again, back to when early on in rotations, you're not going to know as much of what is going to be necessarily like a really great opportunity for asking for a letter, but just start asking and collect along the way. Again, you can collect as many as you want and decide later how you want to use these letters, but definitely have an idea as you're going along and trying to collect what you would need. 2 internal medicine related letters, and at least 1 that would be any specialty. Could be another internal medicine, could be family letter or peds letter to go hand with those 2 IM letters. And then as you go farther along, I think you get that stronger understanding of like, oh yeah, this was a great experience. I'm definitely sure that this is going to be a strong letter coming out of it. Always ask well on the rotation for those letters. Don't wait till after. It could be possible to ask after, but we've seen time and time again where as time passes, it becomes more difficult to ask for letters. Maybe those individual writers kind of are seeing new students, and maybe they're busy and not checking their email and being able to get a hold of, and it just couples together to be like, well, time has passed. It's less likely to get maybe a letter at all, or even a strong letter, if you would have asked from knowing from the start, when knowing them, working with them. It is just more genuine too to ask in person, and don't be afraid to ask. Um, One more thing, I guess, when I'm thinking about it, if you're not sure when saying, can you write me a letter? It might be best to kind of leave it open-ended to say, like, I really appreciate if you could write me a letter, but I would be happy to provide or take part in any additional experience to help you in writing that letter. So you're giving them the opportunity to have that out and say, no, they're not comfortable with that, or giving them the chance to say, well, yeah, I'll write you a letter, but send me more information, send me your CV, or come work with me a few more days. And that could be offhand, that could be on the weekend or something. We see a lot of students do that and have a stronger opportunity for a letter. With the unique letter types, especially for internal medicine, we see two main ones that are similar to other specialties. That's what I kind of highlight other ones here to see that it's not unique to internal medicine that we're seeing these two different unique letters. Chair letter and the standardized evaluative letter are two different letter types here, where they're coming from different places. A chair letter would be written from a department chair of medicine, whether at maybe your institution or of a department elsewhere, external. And either could fit as a department chair letter, and some programs may require this. It is what I'm seeing, I think, less and less common, at least regionally here, that they're being asked for. But I think still with those programs holding to this is a bit of more of that formality. It's that higher role kind of really signing off and saying, that this is a solid candidate for residency. So there is definitely benefit to it. But we see a lot of the time when our internal chair is writing these letters, it's not quite as personal or as focused on clinical skills as from someone that might be working with you on rotation and know you better in that way. So I usually consider this as a good fourth letter opportunity. If you could achieve a chair letter, say from someone that is not as familiar with your clinical skills, but then and fitting as an additional fourth letter, not one of your three main that are focusing on clinical skills. But that chair letter definitely being of benefit, and maybe it could be a chair person that you had rotated with, which would be even better. A standardized evaluative letter, this CEL, otherwise known letter, is newer, is only a few years kind of in the making. That is a template that was developed by the WAIM organization that is saying, we have this template that we like writers to use to evaluate their individuals, rather than writing this open narrative letter of recommendation. In this template, then programs can use in comparing applicants from all different institutions across the country more easily. It's adding more standardization to the residency application. So it's only helping programs in the big picture. Very similar to a clinical evaluation, this has qualitative and quantitative feedback on it. So instead of a typical letter just being open, written, this person's great because of blah, 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 they're putting it will have that section for the open feedback and written feedback, but it additionally has areas that would be more of check marks. They're good in this area and that area, and on to what level. So with that standardization really helps those programs. It is just a matter of taking that template to go to a writer and give it to them when asking, still uploaded the same in the residency application system. So with that, I would definitely recommend using that template. your individual school might have a unique template to use. That's a spin-off version of that. We do. And so we modified it a little bit for fitting our institution, but it still follows the main guidelines, so it can be standardized. Again, some other specialties you might, want to look out for these type of letters if you're considering them. But internal medicine, I think it's just good to get both of those, being that some programs, even very few, might require them. And then I was already touching on this and getting ahead, but asking for a letter, asking in person, asking in an open-ended way, so you can give them opportunity to, seek more information and experience with you. Um, you would put these requests into the residency application system, ERAS. I think for pretty much any institution, you're going to be getting this access around or slightly after when you would start rotating in your clinical years. And so it's only possible to get access a year in advance of applying. We can't start any earlier than that, giving out access to the residency application. But once getting that access to ERAS, you can upload or start requesting letters to get uploaded to what's called the LOR portal. So it's just that one section of the residency application focused on letters of rec. And so I provide this access myself to my students at my institution, and I'll say log in as soon as possible, get familiar with it and start requesting letters as early as possible with those opportunities that stand out to you. A lot of students don't jump on that and don't quite listen. And then time passes, and then they realize I haven't collected any letters, or I want to go back and ask people that I rotated with before for letters. And like I was saying before, not the best approach. It's more genuine to ask in person. It's more likely to get that letter and a stronger letter when asking in person on the rotation. So collect along the way when you get that access. Definitely recommend to register, and you can look at it and play around with that portal. How to request letters is not that difficult. You want to be signing off to waive your right to view them, to view these letters. That might be this last page, because they should be really confidential to the letter writer submitting to the residency program. And that's where it gets uploaded into ERAS directly from that letter writer. You're not uploading that letter. It's not passing through you. And so waiving your right to view those letters looks really good in that sense that this wasn't filtered through you at all. And it could be seen as a slight red flag to residency programs if you aren't waiving that right. So definitely, want to give that opportunity to the letter writer to write without you seeing that. Collecting more letters if you need, I said, to where you can collect as many as you want, and then you can figure out later how you want to use them. You can change an additional kind of note. You can change letters down to each program. Mostly students will send the same 3 to 4 letters to all programs in the specialty. So all internal medicine programs, for instance, getting the same 3 to 4 standout, most strong letters that you would like to send. But they may differ given, hey, maybe you rotated with a certain site and you got multiple letters from that site because of how strong your experience was. Maybe you'll send those letters to that site, but vary them more when it comes to different sites. So it might depend on the individual needs or rotation or program, sorry, that you rotated with. And then properly labeling letters as a chair letter when applicable. So it's talking about what a chair letter would be from a department chair, not the same as from a program director or other leadership roles. And I say that because students question that every year. What is this department chair label? So that would be only something you'd select if that was applicable. And you can't take that back. If you wrongly selected that, you have to put in a whole new request for a letter. So definitely being careful when you're putting in the information to request a letter. Yeah, so definitely, again, like considering ahead of time, what would be your kind of goal for letters, how many you're trying to get minimum. If it's considering this one specialty, then that this is giving you that framework, especially for considering like internal medicine. If there's other letters you want to collect just in case, or to support further, your internal medicine rotation for specialties, just having goals in mind, knowing how to really approach that as best as possible. And when in doubt, just ask for that letter. It's definitely going to be worth it. So that was the end of my formal presentation. Definitely wanted to give time if there was questions or anything else that you'd like to highlight.